The train's whistle screamed through the Arizona desert as Victoria Margaret pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the small wooden platform materialize through the dust and heat like a mirage that refused to disappear. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to become the bride of a rancher named Samuel Thornton, a man she knew only through carefully worded letters and one faded photograph that made him look stern and weathered. But the station sign reading Willcox instead of Tombstone sent ice through her veins despite the oppressive June heat of 1882. The conductor appeared at her shoulder, lifting her two worn leather cases with practiced efficiency. "Willcox, miss. Your stop." "No," Victoria said, her voice barely audible over the hiss of steam. "I was meant for Tombstone." The conductor, already moving toward the exit, called back without turning. "Tombstone's the next stop, but you bought a ticket to Willcox. Train's running ahead of schedule today, so you got lucky." Lucky was not the word Victoria would have chosen as she found herself standing alone on a platform that consisted of little more than weathered planks and a single bench, her cases at her feet, watching the train pull away with increasing speed until it became nothing more than a dark speck against the endless blue sky. The heat struck her immediately, a physical force that made her Philadelphia summer dresses feel like wool blankets. Sweat began to form beneath her high collar, and she could feel her carefully pinned hair already beginning to wilt. The station, if it could be called that, was deserted except for a sleeping dog and a closed ticket office with a handwritten sign that read, "Back at 4." Victoria consulted her pocket watch. It was barely past noon. The platform offered no shade, and the sun beat down with merciless intensity on her dark traveling dress. She sat on the bench, trying to maintain her composure, trying not to think about Samuel Thornton waiting at the Tombstone station, probably consulting his own pocket watch with increasing irritation. She had spent 6 months corresponding with Samuel after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and her younger sister's care. Her aunt in Philadelphia had introduced her to the idea of becoming a mail-order bride, and Samuel's letters had seemed kind, if formal. He owned a cattle ranch outside Tombstone and needed a wife who could read and write, manage a household, and tolerate the harsh Arizona territory. Victoria had needed security and a fresh start. It had seemed like a practical arrangement, one that might even grow into affection over time. Now she was stranded in the wrong town, melting in her traveling clothes, with no way to contact Samuel and no idea when the next train might arrive. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A rider approached from the direction of town, moving at an easy pace that suggested he had all the time in the world. As he drew closer, Victoria could see he was young, perhaps in his middle 20s, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. He wore working clothes, a dusty shirt and worn leather vest, boots that had seen considerable use, and a gun belt that sat comfortably on his hips as if it belonged there. He reined in his horse, a sturdy paint gelding, and touched the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, miss. You look like you might be in some difficulty." Victoria stood, smoothing her skirts automatically. "I am supposed to be in Tombstone. I appear to have disembarked at the wrong station." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with fluid grace, his boots hitting the platform with a soft thud. Up close, she could see his eyes were a striking gray-blue, the color of storm clouds, and his face was handsome in a rugged, open way that the photograph of Samuel Thornton had not been. He looked at her cases, then back at her face, and something in his expression shifted to concern. "Next train to Tombstone won't be through until tomorrow morning," he said. "But Tombstone's only about 2 hours from here by horse. I was heading that direction anyway. I can take you if you are comfortable with that arrangement." Victoria hesitated. Every rule of propriety she had been taught screamed against traveling alone with a strange man. But the alternative was spending the night in this desolate place with no accommodations and no protection. She made a quick decision, the kind her aunt would have been horrified by. That would be most appreciated, Mr. Everett, he said, extending his hand. Cole Everett. I have a ranch about halfway between here and Tombstone. Victoria Margaret, she replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, calloused from hard work. I am engaged to be married to Samuel Thornton of Tombstone. He will be expecting me. Something flickered across Cole's face, too quick for her to identify. Sam Thornton. I know him. Good man. His tone was neutral, careful. Let me see about getting you there before he sends out a search party. The problem of transportation presented itself immediately. Cole had one horse, and Victoria's cases were too bulky to easily manage. Cole studied the situation for a moment, then made a decision. There is a general store in town. I can buy a pack mule and some supplies. It will take maybe 30 minutes. Will you be all right waiting here? Victoria nodded, and Cole swung back into his saddle. He paused before riding off. There is some shade on the north side of the station building. Might be more comfortable. He was right. Victoria moved her cases and herself to the shaded area, grateful for even the slight relief from the direct sun. She watched Cole ride toward what passed for Willcox's Main Street, a collection of buildings that looked like a strong wind might blow them over. True to his word, he returned in less than half an hour with a sturdy mule loaded with 2 canteens, a canvas bag that suggested provisions, and a rolled blanket. In case we need to rest, he explained, securing her cases to the mule's pack saddle with practiced efficiency. The trail is not difficult, but it is hot, and you are not dressed for desert riding. That was an understatement. Victoria's traveling dress, appropriate for a train journey, was entirely unsuitable for horseback riding in the Arizona heat. Cole seemed to sense her discomfort because he pulled a large bandana from his saddlebag and soaked it with water from one of the canteens. For your neck, he said, handing it to her. It will help with the heat. The wet cloth against her skin was heaven. Cole then created a makeshift mounting step from a crate he found behind the station and helped Victoria onto his horse. She settled in the saddle, and he swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. The intimacy of the position made her stiffen. I apologize for the necessity, Cole said quietly. But it is the only way to manage both you and the mule. I promise you are safe. Something in his voice made her believe him. Victoria relaxed slightly, and they started out at a walk, the mule following on a lead rope. The landscape was unlike anything Victoria had seen in Pennsylvania. Harsh and beautiful, all golden grass and distant purple mountains, scattered with strange plants that Cole identified as creosote and mesquite. The heat was intense, but the wet bandana helped, and Cole kept the pace easy, stopping twice to let her drink from the canteen. How long have you been in Arizona? Victoria asked during one of these stops. They had dismounted to rest the horse, standing in the minimal shade of a rocky outcropping. For years, Cole said. Came out from Texas after the war. Well, after I was old enough to make my own way. The war ended when I was just a boy. Do you like it here? He considered the question, his eyes scanning the horizon. I do. It is hard country, but it is honest. A man can make something of himself if he is willing to work. And have you made something of yourself? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I have a small ranch, some good cattle, a couple of horses. It is not much yet, but it is mine. No debts. No one telling me what to do. He looked at her. What about you? What brings a lady from back east to Tombstone? Victoria had prepared an answer for this question. Something vague about seeking adventure or new opportunities, but something about Cole's direct gaze made her tell the truth. My father died 18 months ago. He left debts. My younger sister is still in school, living with my aunt, and I needed to secure her future as well as my own. Samuel Thornton seemed like a good man from his letters, and his situation seemed stable. Seemed, Cole repeated softly. But you have never met him. No. He was quiet for a moment, and she wondered what he was thinking. Finally, he said, Sam is a good man. A bit older, set in his ways, but his ranch is successful. You will be provided for. It was exactly what Victoria needed to hear, so why did it make her feel hollow? They continued riding, and as the afternoon wore on, Cole began to point out features of the landscape, telling her stories about the area. He had a natural way of talking, neither too much nor too little, and his voice was pleasant, with a slight Texas drawl that became more pronounced when he was relaxed. Victoria found herself listening not just to his words but to the sound of his voice, the warmth of him at her back, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them. That peak there, he said, pointing to a distinctive mountain, is where I found my best breeding bull. He was wild, living with a herd of range cattle, but he had the build and temperament I wanted. Took me 3 days to separate him and get him back to my ranch. 3 days. I am persistent, Cole said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The sun was lower in the sky when they crested a rise and Cole drew the horse to a stop. My ranch, he said simply. Below them, in a small valley with a creek running through it, was a collection of buildings. A house, modest but well-built, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and the whole place had an air of careful maintenance. It is beautiful, Victoria said, and meant it. Thank you. There was genuine pleasure in his voice. I built most of it myself. The house still needs work inside, and I want to expand the barn, but it is coming together. They did not descend to the ranch. Instead, Cole guided the horse to continue along the trail, though Victoria noticed him look back once, a longing expression on his face that made her wonder what he was thinking. The conversation during the second half of their journey became more personal. Cole asked about Philadelphia, about her family, about what she liked to read and what she hoped for in her new life. Victoria found herself answering honestly, telling him about her sister Margaret, who was 15 and desperately wanted to be a teacher, about her father who had been a scholar and a dreamer but not a practical man, about her fears of disappointing Samuel Thornton or failing in her new role. You will not fail, Cole said with quiet conviction. You are brave enough to travel across a continent to start a new life. That takes courage most people never have to find in themselves. Or desperation, Victoria said. Courage and desperation often look the same, Cole replied. The difference is in what you do with them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when the buildings of Tombstone came into view. Victoria felt a knot form in her stomach. In a few minutes, she would meet Samuel Thornton, the man she had agreed to marry, and this strange, comfortable interlude with Cole Everett would end. As they entered town, people looked at them curiously. A young woman riding with Cole Everett was apparently noteworthy. Cole seemed unbothered by the attention, guiding his horse directly to the Grand Hotel. Sam will likely be here, he said. It is where most people wait when meeting someone off the train. He was right. A man emerged from the hotel as they arrived, and Victoria knew immediately it was Samuel Thornton. He was older than his photograph had suggested, probably in his middle 40s, with graying hair and a thick build that suggested he had once been powerful but was beginning to go soft. His face was weathered, his expression stern, and when he saw Victoria sitting in front of Cole, his eyes narrowed. Miss Margaret. His voice was gruff. Yes, Victoria said. I am so sorry. I got off at the wrong station, and Mr. Everett was kind enough to bring me here. Cole dismounted and helped Victoria down, his hands steady on her waist. Samuel did not move to help, instead watching Cole with an expression Victoria could not quite read. Everett, Samuel said with a curt nod. Thornton, Cole replied evenly. He began untying Victoria's cases from the mule. I will take those, Samuel said, stepping forward. He looked at Victoria for the first time with real attention, his eyes traveling over her dusty, wilted traveling dress, her wind-tangled hair. You should have stayed on the train. I made a mistake, Victoria said, feeling suddenly defensive. Mr. Everett helped me when I had no other options. I am sure he did, Samuel said, and there was something in his tone that made Victoria's spine stiffen. Cole set the cases down carefully. She is safe and unharmed, Sam. That is what matters. Is it? Samuel picked up the cases. Thank you for your assistance, Everett. I can manage from here. It was a clear dismissal. Cole looked at Victoria, and for a moment, their eyes met. She wanted to thank him properly, to say something that would convey what his kindness had meant, but Samuel was already moving toward the hotel entrance. Good luck, Miss Margaret, Cole said softly. Then he touched his hat brim, mounted his horse, and rode away, leading the pack mule behind him. Victoria watched him go, feeling an unexpected sense of loss. Then Samuel cleared his throat, and she turned to follow him into the hotel. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of practicalities. Samuel had secured rooms for them, separate of course, and arrangements had been made for a wedding ceremony the following afternoon. He was brisk and businesslike as he explained his expectations, his ranch, his household needs. Victoria listened, trying to reconcile this stern, somewhat cold man with the warmer tone of his letters. You will find I am fair but firm, Samuel said over dinner in the hotel restaurant. My first wife passed 3 years ago, and the house has needed a woman's touch since then. You can read and write, your letter said. Yes, my father was a professor. Good. You will need to keep the household accounts. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and during busy seasons, we hire additional help. You will be expected to cook for them. I can cook basic meals, Victoria said, though her aunt had employed a cook, and Victoria's experience was limited. Samuel nodded. You will learn. My ranch is successful, Miss Margaret. You will want for nothing material. I expect loyalty, hard work, and discretion in return. Discretion. I am a private man. What happens in my house stays in my house. There was something in the way he said it that made Victoria uncomfortable, but she told herself she was being foolish. He was simply setting expectations as any employer might. Except he was not going to be her employer. He was going to be her husband. That night, lying in her hotel room, Victoria found herself thinking not about Samuel Thornton but about Cole Everett. The way he had patiently pointed out landmarks, the care with which he had secured her cases, the quiet strength in his voice when he said she would not fail. She thought about his ranch in the valley, built with his own hands, and the longing expression on his face when he looked back at it. She told herself firmly that such thoughts were inappropriate and dangerous. She had made a commitment to Samuel Thornton, and she would honor it. Cole Everett was simply a kind stranger who had helped her in a difficult situation, nothing more. But when she finally slept, she dreamed of storm-colored eyes and a voice with a Texas drawl. The wedding ceremony the next day was brief and impersonal, conducted by a justice of the peace in his office with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. Victoria wore her best dress, newly cleaned and pressed, and Samuel wore a dark suit that smelled of mothballs. He placed a thin gold band on her finger, kissed her cheek with dry lips, and signed the register. Just like that, Victoria Margaret became Victoria Thornton. The ride to Samuel's ranch took most of the afternoon. The ranch was larger than Cole's, with more buildings and more cattle, but it lacked the careful, personal touches that had made Cole's property charming. Everything here was functional, utilitarian. The house was a sprawling adobe structure that was cool inside but felt empty, despite being furnished. Samuel showed her through the rooms quickly. Kitchen, parlor, my office which you do not enter, bedrooms upstairs. He paused at the base of the staircase. I will expect you in my bed tonight. You understand that is part of the arrangement. Victoria felt her face flush. I understand. Good. He checked his pocket watch. The hands will be in for dinner at 6. Cold meat and bread will suffice for tonight. Tomorrow you can begin proper cooking. He left her then, walking out to inspect something with his cattle, and Victoria stood in her new kitchen feeling more alone than she had felt standing on the platform at Willcox. The following weeks established a pattern. Victoria rose early, prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, prepared lunch, worked in the garden Samuel had neglected, prepared dinner, and fell into bed exhausted. Samuel was not cruel, but he was distant, treating her more like a housekeeper than a wife. Their physical intimacy was brief and perfunctory, something he seemed to view as another task to be completed. The two ranch hands, Ben and Carlos, were kind to her, complimenting her cooking as it improved and helping with tasks that required strength she did not possess. But they were gone most days, working distant parts of the ranch, and Victoria found herself spending long hours alone with her thoughts. Thoughts that kept returning to a 2-hour ride and a man who had treated her with more genuine warmth than her husband had shown in 3 weeks of marriage. She scolded herself for such disloyal thinking. She had made her choice and she would live with it. Samuel provided for her, gave her a home, and expected nothing she had not agreed to give. If there was no warmth, no real companionship, well, she had never expected those things. The letters had made the practical nature of the arrangement clear. So why did she feel so hollow? The answer came one Saturday when Samuel announced they were going into Tombstone for supplies. Victoria dressed carefully, eager for any break in routine, and they made the journey in Samuel's wagon. Tombstone was bustling, full of miners and cowboys and businessmen, loud and rough and alive in a way the ranch was not. Samuel gave her a list and money for the general store while he attended to business at the bank. Victoria was examining fabrics, thinking about making new curtains for the kitchen, when she heard a familiar voice. Miss Margaret? Or I suppose it is Mrs. Thornton now. She turned to find Cole Everett standing a few feet away, hat in hand, surprise and pleasure evident on his face. He looked exactly as she remembered, though perhaps the sun had darkened his skin a bit more, and she felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Mr. Everett, she managed. What a surprise. I am in for supplies myself, he said, gesturing to the list in his hand. How are you finding married life? It was a polite question, the kind anyone might ask, but Victoria found she could not give a polite answer. Not to him. It is an adjustment, she said carefully. Something in her tone made his expression shift to concern. Are you being treated well? Yes, Victoria said quickly. Samuel provides everything I need. That was not quite what I asked. Before Victoria could respond, Samuel's voice cut through the store. Victoria, we are leaving. She turned to see her husband standing in the doorway, his face set in hard lines. He looked at Cole, then back at Victoria, and she saw anger flash in his eyes. Good day, Mr. Everett, Victoria said quickly, and hurried to follow Samuel. He did not speak during the entire wagon ride home, but his silence was worse than anger. When they arrived at the ranch, he gripped her arm, not hard enough to hurt but firmly enough to make his point. You will not speak to Cole Everett again, he said flatly. Do you understand? He was simply being polite, Victoria protested. I know his type, young, handsome, full of charm. I also know he has been interested in acquiring some of my land, and I will not have him using my wife to further his interests. That is ridiculous. He was only being kind. Samuel's grip tightened slightly. You are my wife, Victoria. You will obey me in this. Stay away from Cole Everett. He released her and walked away, leaving Victoria rubbing her arm and feeling trapped in a way she had not felt since agreeing to this arrangement. But fate, or perhaps simple geography, had other plans. A week later, one of Samuel's horses got loose and ended up on Cole's property. Samuel sent Carlos to retrieve it, but the ranch hand returned empty-handed with a message that Cole insisted on returning the horse personally, to ensure it had not been injured. Samuel was in Bisbee on business when Cole arrived the next day, leading the wayward horse. Victoria saw him from the kitchen window and felt her pulse quicken. She told herself it was merely surprise, but she knew she was lying. She stepped onto the porch as Cole dismounted. "Mr. Everett, thank you for returning our horse." "Mrs. Thornton." He touched his hat brim. "The mare got tangled in some wire on the fence line between our properties. I treated the cuts, but they should be watched for infection. I will tell my husband." Cole nodded, but he did not immediately leave. "How are you, Victoria?" The use of her first name, spoken in that gentle Texas drawl, nearly undid her. "I am well. Are you?" She met his eyes, those storm-colored eyes that seemed to see too much, and found she could not maintain the lie. "I am alive and adequately provided for. That is more than many women can say. That is not an answer to my question. It is the only answer I can give." Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "If you ever need help, my ranch is less than an hour's ride from here. You would be welcome, no matter what the circumstance." "That is kind, but inappropriate, Mr. Everett. I am a married woman. I am aware. I am offering friendship, Victoria. Just friendship. But the offer stands." He mounted his horse and rode away, and Victoria stood on the porch long after he disappeared. Her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating too fast. Samuel returned from Bisbee in a foul mood. His business had not gone as planned, and he had been drinking. It was the first time Victoria had seen him intoxicated, and she quickly learned that alcohol made him mean. "Everett was here," he said, cornering her in the kitchen. "Do not bother denying it. Ben saw him. He returned your horse, the one that got loose, and you spoke to him, briefly, to thank him for returning the animal." Samuel grabbed her wrist, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "I told you to stay away from him. He came here. I could hardly be rude. You could have sent him away. You wanted to talk to him." His face was close to hers now, his breath sour with whiskey. "You like him. I saw it that first day. The way you looked at him when he brought you to town." "You are being absurd," Victoria said, trying to pull away. "And you are hurting me. I am your husband. I have the right to hurt you if you displease me." He shoved her away, and Victoria caught herself against the kitchen table. Samuel glared at her for a long moment, then turned and strode out of the house. She heard him shouting at Ben and Carlos, his anger finding new targets. Victoria sank into a chair, shaking. She had made a terrible mistake. She saw that now with perfect clarity. Samuel was not simply stern or distant. There was cruelty in him, kept barely in check by his sense of propriety and control. The drinking had loosened those checks, and she had seen what lay beneath. She thought about Cole's offer. She could go to him, ask for help. But what could he do? She was legally married. Samuel had the right to her obedience, to her body. The law would side with him in any dispute. No, she had made this bed, and she would lie in it. She would simply have to be more careful, more obedient. Perhaps if she tried harder to please Samuel, he would be kinder. The summer heat intensified, and with it, Samuel's temper seemed to worsen. The drinking became more frequent, and his criticisms more cutting. He found fault with her cooking, her cleaning, her appearance, her speech. Nothing she did was good enough. He did not hit her, but his grip on her arms grew harder, his shoves more forceful. She began to wear long sleeves to hide the bruises. Ben and Carlos noticed, she could tell, but what could they do? Samuel was their employer and she was just his wife. It was August when the situation reached a crisis point. Samuel had been drinking heavily one evening, angry about cattle prices and the heat and a dozen other things. He came into the bedroom where Victoria was already in her nightgown, preparing for sleep. "Get up," he demanded. "I want you to fix me something to eat." "Of course," Victoria said, reaching for her wrapper. "Not like that. I said now." She started toward the door in just her nightgown, but Samuel blocked her path. "Samuel, please." "Please what?" "You are my wife. You will do as I say when I say it." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into a bruise that was still tender, and Victoria cried out. Something in her voice must have penetrated his drunken haze because he froze, looking at his hand on her arm, at her face where tears were starting to form. For a moment, she thought he might apologize, might show some remorse. Instead, he released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. "Get out of my sight," he said. "You are useless." Victoria fled to the kitchen, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. She could not do this anymore. She could not live like this, walking on eggshells, afraid of her own husband's moods and hands. She thought of Cole's words. "If you ever need help, my ranch is less than an hour's ride." The idea was insane. Running away from her husband to another man's ranch would cause a scandal that would destroy whatever reputation she had left. Samuel would come after her, and he would have every legal right to bring her back and punish her. But staying might destroy something worse than her reputation. It might destroy her spirit, her sense of self, the core of who she was. Victoria made her decision in the dark kitchen, while her husband snored drunkenly in the bedroom above. She would not run tonight, not in the dark and not without preparation. But she would run. Over the next week, she planned carefully. She set aside small amounts of money from the household funds, hiding coins in her sewing basket. She mended her riding skirt, preparing it for hard use. She watched the patterns of the ranch, learning when Ben and Carlos would be far out with the cattle, when Samuel would be occupied with his account books or his drinking. She thought constantly about whether this was the right choice. Perhaps she was overreacting. Perhaps things would get better. But then Samuel would grab her wrist too hard, or shove her against a wall, and she would remember that this was not going to get better. This was only going to get worse. The opportunity came on a Thursday. Samuel rode to Tombstone early in the morning, announcing he would be gone all day on business. Ben and Carlos left to check on cattle in the far pastures. Victoria was alone. She changed into her riding skirt and boots, packed a small bag with her few precious possessions, her mother's locket, the picture of her sister, the letters from Margaret. She took the money she had hidden, knowing it was stealing but unable to care. She was not brave enough to take one of Samuel's good horses, but there was an old mare he rarely used, gentle and steady if not fast. Victoria saddled the horse with shaking hands, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She mounted, looked once at the house that had been her prison for 2 months, and turned the mare toward Cole Everett's ranch. The ride felt eternal, though she knew it was less than an hour. Every sound made her jump, certain that Samuel had returned early and was pursuing her. But the trail remained empty, and finally, she crested the rise above Cole's Valley and saw his ranch spread out below her. It looked even more beautiful than she remembered. The late summer sun turning the grass to gold, the buildings neat and well kept, the cattle peaceful in their pastures. She could see Cole working near the barn, and as she guided the mare down the slope, he looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. She saw the exact moment he recognized her. He dropped whatever tool he had been holding and started walking toward her. his pace quickening as he got closer and saw whatever was evident in her face. Victoria dismounted before he reached her, her legs shaking so badly she nearly fell. Cole caught her, his hands steady on her arms, and she flinched without meaning to. His face went very still. Carefully, gently, he pushed up her sleeve, revealing the bruises that mottled her skin in various stages of healing. His jaw clenched, and when he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled fury. "How long?" "It got worse over time," Victoria whispered. "I could not stay anymore. I know I should not be here. I know this will cause trouble for you. But you said if I ever needed help. And I meant it." Cole released her arm carefully, as if she were made of spun glass. "You are safe here, Victoria. I promise you that. Samuel will come for me. I am his wife. Let him come." There was steel in Cole's voice now. "He will find I have opinions about men who lay hands on women." Victoria felt tears start to flow, all the fear and stress and misery of the past months finally breaking through the dam she had built to contain them. Cole made a soft sound of distress and pulled her into his arms, careful of her bruises, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "You are safe," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe now. I have you." And for the first time since getting off the train at the wrong station, Victoria felt like that might actually be true. Cole brought her into his house, settling her in the kitchen where sunlight streamed through clean windows. The interior was simple but comfortable, clearly the home of a man who took pride in his surroundings, even if he lacked a woman's decorative touch. He made her tea, strong and hot and sweet, and sat across from her while she drank it, not speaking, just being present. "Samuel will say I am a runaway wife," Victoria said finally. "The law will be on his side." "The law is not always right," Cole replied. "But we will deal with Samuel when he comes. Right now, you need rest and food and time to heal. You are taking a terrible risk, helping me. Then it is a risk worth taking." He met her eyes steadily. "I knew something was wrong when I saw you in the store that day. I should have done more then." "What could you have done?" "I made my choice when I agreed to marry him." "A choice made without full knowledge is not a real choice," Cole said. "Sam presented himself one way in letters, another way in reality. That is not your fault." They talked for hours, Victoria telling him everything about her marriage, the loneliness and fear and gradual realization that she had trapped herself. Cole listened without judgment, his anger at Samuel evident but controlled, his compassion for Victoria clear. "What will you do?" he asked finally. "You can stay here as long as you need, but eventually, a decision will have to be made." "I do not know," Victoria admitted. "Divorce is almost impossible to obtain, and even if I could, I would be ruined. No decent person would associate with a divorced woman." "That seems like a problem with decent people, not with you." Despite everything, Victoria found herself smiling. "You have a way of looking at things that is very different from what I was taught. My mama used to say that rules made by unjust people do not deserve respect." She was talking about something else, but I think it applies here. They were still talking when they heard the sound of a horse approaching fast. Cole was on his feet immediately, his hand going to his gun. "Stay inside," he ordered, and went out onto the porch. Victoria moved to the window where she could see without being easily seen. Her heart sank. Samuel was dismounting from his horse, his face red with fury, and he was armed. "Everett," Samuel shouted. "Send out my wife." Cole stood on the porch, relaxed but ready, his hand near his gun. "Mrs. Thornton is under my protection, Sam. She is not going anywhere. She is my wife and she is coming home with me. This is none of your concern. I am making it my concern." Cole descended the porch steps slowly. "She came here seeking help because you have been beating her. I have seen the bruises. What I do with my wife in my own home is my business. Not when it involves hurting someone who cannot defend herself. Samuel's hand moved toward his gun, and Victoria felt her breath stop. But Cole was faster, his weapon drawn and aimed before Samuel's cleared his holster. "Do not," Cole said quietly. "I do not want to shoot you, Sam, but I will if you force me to." They stood frozen for a long moment, Samuel clearly weighing his options. Finally, he raised his hands away from his gun. "This is not over, Everett. She is my legal wife. I will go to the law." "You do that," Cole said. "And I will tell the law and anyone else who will listen exactly how you have been treating her. We will see how that affects your reputation and your business dealings." Samuel's face went even redder. "You think you can ruin me? I think the truth can ruin you. I am just willing to tell it." For a moment, Victoria thought Samuel might try to draw anyway. Consequences be damned. But he was a businessman at heart and he could calculate odds. He turned his fury on Victoria instead. "You are a whore," he spat. "Running to another man's bed before my side of our bed was even cold." "That is enough," Cole said, his voice hard. "Get off my property, Sam. And do not come back unless you want serious trouble." Samuel mounted his horse, jerking the reins with unnecessary force. "This is not over," he repeated, and rode away at a gallop. Cole watched until he was out of sight, then holstered his gun and returned to the house. Victoria was shaking again, and he guided her to a chair. "He will make trouble," she said. "He will tell everyone I ran away with you, that we are having an affair. Let him talk. Anyone who knows me will not believe it, and anyone who does not know me does not matter." He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands carefully. "Victoria, I meant what I said. You are under my protection. I will not let him hurt you again. But the law. The nearest law is the sheriff in Tombstone, and Jim Forbes is a fair man. I will talk to him, explain the situation. Not every lawman believes a man has the right to beat his wife, regardless of what the letter of the law says." Victoria wanted to believe him, but she had learned that wanting something did not make it true. Still, what choice did she have? She could not go back to Samuel, and she had nowhere else to go. "I am so tired," she said softly. "Then rest. You can have my bed. I will sleep in the barn." "I cannot take your bed." "You are not taking it. I am giving it. Please, Victoria. Let me help you." She was too exhausted to argue further. Cole showed her to his bedroom, a simple space with a large bed covered in a handmade quilt, a chest of drawers and little else. It smelled faintly of him, of leather and soap and something else she could not quite name but found comforting. "There is a lock on the door," Cole said, showing her. "Use it if it makes you feel safer." "I feel safe with you," Victoria said, and realized it was true. He smiled, a real smile that lit up his face. "Sleep as long as you need. I will be outside if you need anything." Victoria lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and fell asleep almost immediately, so exhausted that even her fear of Samuel could not keep her awake. She woke to darkness and the smell of cooking. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back at Samuel's ranch and her heart raced with panic. Then she remembered, and relief flooded through her so strongly it was almost painful. She found Cole in the kitchen, frying steaks over the stove. He turned when he heard her. "I was just about to wake you. I thought you might be hungry." Victoria realized she was starving. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. "Can I help?" "You can sit and rest. This is nearly ready." They ate together, and the food was simple but good. Cole was a better cook than Victoria had expected, and she said so. "Years of living alone," he said with a shrug. "A man learns or he starves." After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cooling, the oppressive heat of the day fading to something almost pleasant. "I cannot stay here indefinitely," Victoria said. "It is not proper, and it will ruin your reputation as well as mine." "I am not much concerned with reputation," Cole said. "But you are right that we need to find a solution. I meant what I said about talking to Sheriff Forbes. Tomorrow, I will ride into Tombstone and explain the situation. What if he sides with Samuel? Then we will figure something else out." He turned to look at her in the starlight. "I am not giving you back to a man who hurts you, Victoria, no matter what the law says." "Why?" Victoria asked softly. "Why are you doing all this for me? You barely know me." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe in destiny?" he asked finally. "I do not know. Maybe. When I saw you standing on that platform in Willcox, all alone and trying so hard to be brave, something in me just knew. I knew you were important. I knew you mattered. And when I had to hand you over to Sam Thornton, it felt wrong. I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, that I had no claim on you, that you had made your choice. But I could not shake the feeling." "Cole, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I am not trying to take advantage of your situation. I just want you to understand that helping you is not some burden I am reluctantly taking on. You being here, safe and under my roof, feels right in a way I cannot fully explain." Victoria's throat felt tight. "I feel it too," she whispered. "That day on the ride to Tombstone, I felt more comfortable with you, more myself, than I have felt with anyone in years. And when I married Samuel, all I could think about was that I was making a terrible mistake, that I should have gotten off the train at the wrong station and just stayed there. Why did you not? Fear, duty, the belief that I had no other choice." She looked at him, this man who had shown her more kindness in a few encounters than her husband had shown in 2 months of marriage. "I think I got off at the right station after all. It just took me a while to realize it." Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His thumb brushed gently over her knuckles. "I am glad you came here today. I wish you had come sooner." "So do I." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands like young sweethearts, and Victoria felt something in her chest that had been tight and painful for months finally begin to ease. Cole rode to Tombstone early the next morning, leaving Victoria with instructions to lock the doors and not open them for anyone except him. He took his rifle, and Victoria noticed he also took his pistol, wearing it strapped to his thigh. She wanted to tell him to be careful, but the words seemed inadequate. He returned late in the afternoon, and his expression was grim. "What happened?" Victoria asked immediately. "I spoke with Jim Forbes. He was sympathetic but frank. Unless Sam does something criminal like attempting to seriously injure or kill you, the law will not intervene in a domestic situation. He suggested I return you to your husband and wash my hands of the whole affair." Victoria felt her hope crumble. "So I have to go back?" "No." Cole's voice was firm. "You did not let me finish. Forbes also said that if Sam wanted to pursue legal action to force your return, he would have to file papers and go through a process. That would take time, and it would require him to publicly state his reasons. Forbes hinted, very quietly, that if those reasons involved admitting to the kind of treatment you have endured, Sam's reputation in Tombstone might suffer significantly. Mining and ranching interests do not like to do business with men known to be cruel, even to their wives. So Samuel has to choose between his reputation and his pride," Victoria said slowly. "Essentially, yes. And knowing Sam, he values his business interests more than anything else." Cole paused. "Forbes also said that if you were to obtain your own legal representation and file for a separation on grounds of cruelty, you might have a case. It would be difficult and expensive, but possible. I have no money for a lawyer." "I do." Cole held up a hand before she could protest. Before you argue, just listen. I am not rich, but I have some savings. I would like to use them to help you. Cole, I cannot accept that. It is too much. Then consider it a loan, to be repaid whenever you are able. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. Victoria, I meant what I said. I am not going to let you be forced back into a situation where you are hurt. If that means paying for a lawyer, I will pay for a lawyer. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes again. I do not deserve your kindness. You deserve far more than you have received. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the touch achingly gentle. Let me help you, please. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Cole pulled her into a careful embrace, and Victoria rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The next few weeks passed in a strange suspended state. Victoria stayed at Cole's ranch, helping with household tasks but mainly just healing. Cole hired a lawyer in Tombstone, a man named Richard Caldwell who specialized in complicated civil cases and had a reputation for taking on unpopular causes. Caldwell visited the ranch and interviewed Victoria at length, documenting her injuries and her testimony. He was honest about her chances. Separation on grounds of cruelty is possible but rare, he said. We will need to prove significant mistreatment, and we will need witnesses if possible. Ben and Carlos, when approached discreetly by Caldwell, agreed to testify if needed. They had seen Samuel's treatment of Victoria, and neither man was comfortable with it. Their testimony, combined with Victoria's injuries and her own account, gave Caldwell confidence that they had a viable case. Samuel, predictably, was furious. He tried to gain access to Cole's ranch several times, but Cole had warned off his property, and Samuel was smart enough not to force a confrontation. Instead, he began spreading stories in Tombstone, claiming that Victoria had run away with Cole, that the two had been having an affair all along, that she was a woman of low morals who had trapped him into marriage. The stories hurt, especially when Victoria ventured into town with Cole one day and saw women she had never met look at her with cold judgment. But they also had an unexpected effect. Several people in Tombstone, including some prominent businessmen, were disgusted by Samuel's behavior. Airing one's private grievances so publicly was considered ungentlemanly, and Samuel's increasingly wild accusations made him look unstable. He is hurting himself more than he is hurting you, Caldwell told Victoria with satisfaction. Every accusation he makes, we can counter with testimony about his violence and drinking. The court of public opinion is starting to turn. Through all of this, Victoria and Cole were never alone in a way that could be considered improper. When Caldwell or other visitors came to the ranch, they were always present together. Cole slept in the barn or the bunkhouse, never in the main house with Victoria. They were scrupulous about maintaining propriety, even though Victoria increasingly wished they did not have to be, because she was falling in love with Cole Everett, if she was being honest with herself. Maybe she had started falling that first day on the ride to Tombstone, or maybe it had happened more slowly, over conversations on the porch and shared meals and the 1,000 small kindnesses he showed her every day. But it was undeniable now. The way her heart lifted when she heard his voice. The way she found herself watching him work, admiring the strength and grace of his movements. The way his smile could brighten her entire day. The way she felt safe and valued and seen in a way she had never experienced before. She was careful not to show it, knowing that any hint of impropriety would destroy their case and confirm Samuel's accusations. But sometimes, when Cole looked at her in a certain way, she thought maybe he felt the same. It was October when the case finally went before a judge. The territorial court system was still developing, and family law was handled in a somewhat haphazard manner. But Caldwell had managed to get a hearing before Judge Thomas Morrison, who was known to be fair-minded if somewhat unpredictable. Victoria dressed in her most modest dress, her hair pulled back severely, trying to look as respectable as possible. Cole drove her to the courthouse in his wagon, and she could feel him radiating tension the entire way. "Whatever happens, we will deal with it," he said, helping her down. "You are not going back to him." The hearing was held in a small room with just the judge, the lawyers, the principals, and a handful of observers. Samuel looked prosperous and respectable in his best suit, playing the part of the wronged husband. Victoria, with her carefully documented bruises and her quiet testimony, played the part of the abused wife. Caldwell was brilliant, walking Victoria through her testimony with compassion and precision, then presenting Ben and Carlos's accounts. Samuel's lawyer, a man named Fletcher who had a reputation for aggressive tactics, tried to paint Victoria as a scheming woman who had trapped Samuel and then abandoned him when a better prospect appeared. But his accusations rang hollow when confronted with the physical evidence of abuse. Samuel himself took the stand, denying any cruelty. He admitted to occasionally correcting his wife, as was his right, but insisted he had never truly harmed her. Victoria watched him lie with a straight face and felt a cold certainty that she had been right to leave. Judge Morrison listened to everything with an impassive expression. When the testimony concluded, he called for a brief recess to consider his decision. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Victoria sat on a bench in the hallway, Cole beside her, their hands almost but not quite touching. "Whatever he decides, I want you to know something," Cole said quietly. "These past 2 months, having you at my ranch, it has been the best time of my life. I know the circumstances are terrible, and I know you are going through something awful, but having you there, seeing you every day, it has made me happier than I have been in years." Victoria turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "Cole, I am not saying this to pressure you or to take advantage. I just want you to know, when this is over, no matter what happens, if you need somewhere to go, somewhere to be, my home is your home for as long as you want it." "And if I want it forever?" Victoria asked softly. Cole's eyes widened. "Victoria, are you saying?" Before she could answer, Caldwell emerged from the courtroom. "He has made his decision." They filed back in, and Judge Morrison looked at them all with the weary expression of a man who had seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. "I have heard testimony that troubles me greatly," he began. "The evidence of physical harm to Mrs. Thornton is undeniable. The testimony of Mr. Thornton's employees regarding his treatment of his wife is credible. While I cannot grant a full divorce, which would require different grounds and a different court, I can and will grant a legal separation on grounds of cruelty." Victoria felt Cole's hand find hers, squeezing tightly. "Mrs. Thornton is released from any obligation to cohabit with Mr. Thornton. She is free to live where she chooses and maintain her own household. Mr. Thornton is ordered to provide her with a reasonable monthly stipend, the amount to be determined by this court, for her maintenance. Should Mr. Thornton violate the terms of this separation or attempt to coerce Mrs. Thornton into returning to the marital home, he will face criminal charges." Samuel was on his feet, his face red with fury. "This is outrageous. She is my wife. Sit down, Mr. Thornton, or I will hold you in contempt," Judge Morrison said coldly. "You should consider yourself fortunate that I am not charging you criminally for assault. I suggest you take this as an opportunity to reflect on your conduct and perhaps refrain from future matrimonial ventures until you can treat a spouse with the respect and care they deserve." The judge's gavel came down, and it was over. Victoria was free. The next few minutes were a blur of Caldwell explaining details and Samuel shouting threats and the judge's bailiff escorting Samuel from the courthouse. Cole kept his arm around Victoria, shielding her from Samuel's vitriol, and finally they were outside in the cool October air. "You did it," Cole said, turning her to face him. "You are free." "We did it," Victoria corrected. "I could never have done this without you." They stood there on the courthouse steps, looking at each other, and Victoria saw in Cole's eyes everything she felt reflected back at her. Love and hope and the promise of a future. "Victoria," Cole said carefully, "before we were called back in, you said something. You asked what if you wanted my home to be your home forever. Did you mean that?" "I meant it," Victoria said. "Cole, I know the timing is complicated, and I know people will say terrible things about both of us. I know I am legally still married even if I am separated. But I am in love with you. I think I have been since that first day on the ride to Tombstone. And if you feel the same." She did not get to finish because Cole kissed her. It was not a gentle, chaste kiss. It was passionate and claiming and full of all the longing they had both been suppressing for months. Victoria melted into him, her arms coming up around his neck, and for the first time in her life, she understood what desire truly felt like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life if you will let me." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Yes to all of it." They knew the road ahead would not be easy. Victoria could not remarry while Samuel lived, and there was no possibility of divorce in any foreseeable future. But they did not care. They would build a life together outside the bounds of legal marriage, and if society judged them for it, that was society's problem. Cole took Victoria home to his ranch that day, and this time, she moved into the house not as a guest but as a partner. They announced to anyone who asked that Victoria was running her own household on Cole's property, maintaining the fiction of propriety even as everyone knew the truth. Some people in Tombstone shunned them. Others, more understanding or simply more practical, continued to do business with Cole and treated Victoria with cautious respect. Samuel ranted and threatened for a few months, but eventually, he moved to California, taking his bitterness with him and leaving his ranch to be managed by foremen. Victoria and Cole built their life slowly and carefully. She helped him expand his ranch, proving to have a head for business that complemented his skills with cattle and horses. He built her a garden that became the envy of the county, and a library where she could read to her heart's content. They worked side by side during the day and sat on the porch together in the evenings, talking and planning and dreaming. A year after the separation, they held a ceremony of their own. It was not legally binding, but it was spiritually meaningful. A traveling preacher, more concerned with the condition of their hearts than the state of their legal documentation, agreed to bless their union. Ben and Carlos and a handful of their closest friends attended, and Victoria wore a simple white dress that Cole had bought her in Tucson. "I take you as my wife in the eyes of God," Cole said, sliding a silver ring onto her finger. "I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life." "I take you as my husband in the eyes of God," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "I promise to love you, honor you, support you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life." They kissed as husband and wife, if not in law then in every way that mattered, and began their life together in truth. The months turned into years. Victoria's sister Margaret came to live with them after finishing school, and Cole welcomed her as family, helping to pay for her training as a teacher. Margaret eventually married a merchant in Tombstone and settled nearby, giving Victoria the joy of having family close again. Samuel died in 1887, 5 years after Victoria left him, killed in a bar fight in San Francisco. His lawyer contacted Victoria to inform her, and while she felt no joy at his death, she could not deny her relief. She was finally legally free. "Marry me," Cole said that evening when she told him the news. "Properly, legally, in front of the whole territory. Marry me." "I thought I already did," Victoria teased, touching the silver ring she never removed. You know what I mean. Let me make you Victoria Everett in the eyes of the law as well as in my heart. They were married 3 months later in a proper ceremony in Tombstone's Methodist Church. Victoria wore blue silk, Cole wore a new suit, and half the town attended, including people who had shunned them 5 years earlier but now seemed to have forgotten their earlier judgment. I do not understand people, Victoria whispered to Cole as they greeted guests at the reception. People like a love story with a happy ending, Cole replied. We gave them one. Their first child, a son they named James, was born in 1888. He had his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair, and Cole wept the first time he held him. 2 years later, came a daughter named Rose, who was stubborn and fearless from birth. They raised their children with love and laughter, teaching them to work hard and think independently and never accept injustice as inevitable. The ranch prospered beyond even Cole's early dreams. Victoria's business acumen, combined with Cole's skill and dedication, made them one of the most successful ranching operations in the territory. They expanded their holdings, employed dozens of workers whom they treated fairly and paid well, and became pillars of their community. But more than success or prosperity, they had joy. The kind of joy that comes from building a life with someone who truly sees you, who values you, who makes you better than you could be alone. They had passion that never faded, even after years of marriage. They had partnership, each supporting the other's dreams and ambitions. They had friendship, still sitting on the porch in the evenings to talk as the sun set over their land. Victoria sometimes thought about that day in 1882 when she had gotten off the train at the wrong station, lost and afraid and alone. She thought about the young woman she had been, desperate enough to marry a stranger, and the woman she had become, strong and confident and deeply loved. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked one evening. They were on the porch, as they so often were, watching their children play in the yard while the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. "About wrong stations," Victoria said, leaning against his shoulder. "What about them?" "I was thinking that sometimes the wrong station is exactly the right place to be. Because if I had not gotten off at Willcox, if I had gone straight to Tombstone and married Samuel as planned, I would never have met you. You would not have said, 'Right station's 2 hours, I will take you,' and everything that followed would never have happened." Cole wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Then I am grateful for train schedules and your sense of geography. I am grateful for cowboys who help lost women. I am grateful for strong women who are brave enough to choose their own path, even when it is terrifying." "We are rather grateful people," Victoria observed. "We have rather a lot to be grateful for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge, their children's laughter floating on the evening air. Victoria thought about the long road that had brought them here, the pain and fear and struggle, but also the love and courage and triumph. She had been looking for security when she boarded that train in Philadelphia. She had been looking for a practical arrangement, a marriage of convenience that would provide for her material needs. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found a partner, a lover, a best friend, a home in every sense of the word. "I love you," she said, turning to press a kiss to Cole's jaw. "I love you too," he replied, as he had replied every day for years and would reply every day for the rest of their lives. "Thank you for getting off at the wrong station. Thank you for taking me to the right one." Years continued to pass in their own rhythm, marked not by calendars but by the growth of their children, the expansion of their ranch, the deepening of their love. James grew into a fine young man who inherited his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. Rose became a teacher like her Aunt Margaret, opening a school for ranch children in the valley. Cole and Victoria grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering into maps of their shared life. But Cole still looked at Victoria with the same intensity he had shown on that first ride to Tombstone, and Victoria still felt her heart skip when Cole smiled at her. When they were in their 60s, sitting on that same porch they had sat on for so many years, their grandchildren playing in the yard where their children once had, Victoria said, "Do you ever wonder how our lives might have been different if I had gotten off at the right station that day?" Cole considered the question seriously, as he always considered her questions. "I suppose you would have married Sam Thornton as planned. I suppose I would have eventually found someone else to share this place with, or maybe I would not have. We would both have lived, but I do not think we would have truly been alive. Not the way we have been together." "That is what I think too," Victoria said. "I think we were meant for each other, and the universe conspired to make sure we found each other, even if it took wrong trains and bad marriages and court cases to make it happen. Then I am grateful to the universe for its conspiracy. As am I." They held hands, these two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a love that lasted, who had created a family and a legacy and a life that mattered. The sun set over their valley, painting everything in gold, and somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear their daughter preparing dinner while their grandchildren argued cheerfully about something inconsequential. "We did well," Cole said softly. "We did very well indeed," Victoria agreed. And they had. From a chance encounter on a remote station platform to a lifetime of partnership and love, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Victoria had gotten off at the wrong station, but Cole Everett had taken her exactly where she needed to go. Not to Tombstone, not to a loveless marriage, but to a home, to a family, to a love that would endure as long as they both drew breath and beyond. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the struggles or the scandals or the social judgment. Not the legal complications or the painful past. Just the love, pure and strong and true, that they had found in each other and nurtured into something that would outlast them both. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Victoria leaned her head on Cole's shoulder and thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that getting off at the wrong station had been the best mistake she ever made. Years later, when Victoria was 73 and Cole 75, they celebrated their 50th anniversary of the day they first considered themselves married, the ceremony in Cole's Valley with the traveling preacher. Their children and grandchildren gathered, now including great-grandchildren who ran around the ranch with the same joy James and Rose once had. Margaret was there, elderly herself now but still sharp and witty. She pulled Victoria aside at one point during the celebration. "Do you remember that letter I wrote you?" Margaret asked. "The one where I begged you not to go west, not to marry a stranger?" Victoria smiled. "I remember. You were quite eloquent in your disapproval. I was terrified for you. I thought you were throwing your life away." Margaret took her sister's hand. "I have never been happier to be wrong. Look at what you built, Victoria. Look at this family, this life. You were so brave." "I was desperate," Victoria corrected gently. "But I was lucky. Cole made me brave." "You made each other brave," Margaret said. "That is what love does." The celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing and the kind of joy that comes from family gathered together. Cole and Victoria danced, moving slowly but with the same connection they had always had, their bodies remembering rhythms learned over decades. 50 years, Victoria mused. Well, 50 years since our real wedding. 53 since we met. Best 53 years of my life, Cole said. Even counting the dramatic beginning? Especially counting the dramatic beginning. It made for a good story. Their youngest grandchild, a girl of 8 named Victoria after her grandmother, approached as they left the dance floor. "Grandma, will you tell me the story again? About how you and Grandpa met?" Victoria looked at Cole, who smiled and nodded. They settled on the porch, their usual spot, and their family gathered around as evening fell. "It all started," Victoria began, "when I got off the train at the wrong station." She told the story as she had told it many times before, but it never got old. The fear and confusion of finding herself alone at Willcox. Cole appearing like a figure from a romance novel, offering to help. The 2-hour ride that changed both of their lives. The difficult months that followed. The courage it took to run. The love that sustained them, the life they built together. The children and grandchildren listened, rapt even though they had heard it before. It was a family legend, the story of how their grandparents fell in love, and it never lost its power. When Victoria finished, young Victoria asked, "But Grandma, were you not scared, running away like that?" "Terrified," Victoria admitted. "But sometimes being brave means being scared and doing the right thing anyway." "And Grandpa was the right thing?" Victoria looked at Cole, still seeing the young cowboy who had offered her kindness when she desperately needed it, still feeling the flutter in her chest that his presence had always caused. "Grandpa was the absolute right thing," she said. "The rightest thing that ever happened to me." The celebration continued, but as night fell and the family began to head to their various homes and guest rooms, Victoria and Cole found themselves alone on the porch once more, the place where they had spent so many evenings over so many years. "Do you think we will have many more years like this?" Victoria asked quietly. "I hope so," Cole said. "But even if we do not, we have had more happiness than most people find in several lifetimes. Whatever time we have left, we will spend it together." "Together," Victoria echoed. "That is all I have ever wanted." They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the stars well overhead. The ranch around them was quiet, the cattle settled for the night, the horses peaceful in their corrals. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for, everything they had loved, surrounded them like a benediction. "Thank you," Cole said softly. "For what?" "For getting off at the wrong station. For being brave enough to ask for help. For choosing me over and over again, every day for 50 years. "Thank you for taking me to where I needed to go," Victoria replied, "even though neither of us knew where that was at the time." "I think I knew," Cole said. "The moment I saw you on that platform, something in me recognized you. I did not understand it then, but I knew you were important. I knew you were meant to be part of my life. And I am, I will be, for whatever time we have left." They sat together as the moon rose, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that had lasted through decades and challenges and joys. The wrong station had been the right place. The cowboy's offer to help had been the beginning of everything good in both their lives. In the house behind them, their family slept, the legacy of their love made manifest in children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would carry their story forward. The ranch around them stood as a testament to their partnership, their hard work, their shared dreams realized. Victoria leaned against Cole's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. This man, this life, this love, it was everything she had never known she was looking for when she boarded that train in Philadelphia all those years ago. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every hard moment, every fear, every struggle. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "As would I," Cole said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "1,000 times over." The night deepened around them, but they remained on the porch, reluctant to end this perfect day, this perfect moment, this perfect life they had built together from a chance encounter and a simple offer of help. When they finally went inside, it was hand in hand, as they had done everything for 50 years. And if Victoria sometimes dreamed of that young woman on the station platform, lost and alone and afraid, she woke with a smile, knowing that young woman had found her way home after all. Not to Tombstone, not to the right station, but to something infinitely better. She had found love. She had found partnership. She had found a life worth living and a man worth living it with. And it had all started with a mistake, a wrong station, and a cowboy who said, "I will take you." In the end, those were the only words that mattered. I will take you. I will take you through difficulty and joy. I will take you through challenges and triumphs. I will take you through life, whatever it brings, until death parts us and perhaps beyond. Victoria and Cole Everett lived out their remaining years together on their ranch in Arizona, surrounded by family and love and the land they had worked so hard to build into something beautiful. When Cole died at 79, Victoria held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for taking me to the right place." And when Victoria followed him 2 years later at 75, her last words were, "I am ready to go home now." She was buried beside Cole on a hill overlooking their valley, under a sky as wide and blue as the one that had watched over their first meeting. Their graves were marked with simple stones that bore their names and dates and one line, "Together forever, from the wrong station to the right home." Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to work the ranch, keeping alive the legacy of love and partnership that Victoria and Cole had created. And sometimes, when young members of the family faced difficulties or doubts, the elders would tell them the story of how Victoria got off at the wrong station and Cole said he would take her, and how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into one of the great love stories of their family's history. Because in the end, that is what it was. A love story, not a conventional one, not one without struggle or complication or pain, but a true one, a lasting one, a love story that proved that sometimes the wrong path leads exactly where you need to go, as long as you find the right person to walk it with you. And Victoria and Cole had been exactly the right people for each other, from that first moment on a dusty Arizona platform to their last moments on Earth and beyond, into whatever comes after. Wrong station, right person, perfect love. That was their story, and it would be told and retold for generations. A reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places and that sometimes, getting lost is the only way to truly find your way home.